Hey, it's Mrs. Sewell with some notes on operant conditioning. This is standard 2. We've already talked about standard 1, which is classical conditioning. So today we'll look at operant conditioning. There are 3 major types of learning that we're going to study in this unit. We've done classical conditioning where a neutral stimulus is associated with a natural response. So a bell is associated with food, which elicits the response of drooling, okay? Today we're going to look at operant conditioning, and that's where a response is increased or decreased due to the presence of a reinforcement, like a reward or a punishment. And then the last type of learning we'll talk about is observational learning, and that's learning that just occurs by watching others or imitating others. It's also called social learning. So today we'll start with operant conditioning and take a look at what it is. So operant conditioning, again, it's just a type of learning that is strengthened if it's followed by a reinforcement, or it's diminished if it's followed by a punishment. So rewards will increase the likelihood, sorry about that, the likelihood of the behavior, and a punishment will decrease the likelihood of the behavior. So that's the essence of operant conditioning. So operant conditioning, you're always going to be talking about reinforcements or punishments and behavior, and how they affect behavior. So reinforcement means it's much more likely that the behavior will repeat. So we use this with, if we train a dog, I've taught my dogs to sit and lay down and give a high five, and they'll do it because I've treated them, and so they get a treat and they've learned the behavior. A punishment makes it less likely for you to repeat behaviors. And so, punishments can be groundings or spankings or, taking away your privileges or car keys, putting you in timeout, those kind of things. And of course, I think the nice thing about operant conditioning is that we may not have talked about operant conditioning in growing up, but we've all been on the end of receiving reinforcements or rewards and some kind of punishment usually. That's typical in parenting. It's typical in how we educate people at school. Your grades are essentially a reinforcement or a punishment, right? Depends on the grade. All right, so operant conditioning is different. It's really different from classical conditioning. The main difference is that operant conditioning is voluntary behavior. You're going to make a choice. Are you going to engage in the behavior and, you associate that behavior with a consequence. So you're choosing a behavior and then you're going to receive a consequence. It may be positive, it may be negative. All right. Classical conditioning, on the other hand, is just associating an involuntary response and a stimulus. And so it's always involuntary. So it's drooling or salivating is probably a nicer word, or sweating, or, feeling anxiety or feeling happy. Feeling fear, something that happens automatically. So operant conditioning is voluntary, classical conditioning is involuntary. It's important that you note that. Hopefully you're using the graphic organizer. I should have mentioned that a little bit earlier. There's a graphic organizer on your agenda for, I'm trying to think what date it is, November 20. I don't know if today is the 19th or the 20th. And so that graphic organizer, today's the 19th, sorry. The graphic organizer is on the 19th. It'll be on the 20th too, because we're spending 2 days on these notes. So be sure and get that graphic organizer and fill it out. I think if you're at home, it's a PDF. Don't try and open it with a Google Doc. Your best bet is to print it and then fill it out, okay? All right, so this is a really good video on operant conditioning. So again, if you go to the agenda for the 19th or the 20th, then you can pull up these Google Slides. Watch this video. She does a really good explanation of operant conditioning. So after you've listened to me talk about it, be sure and go and look. Watch. Oops. I don't want to show the video here. There's no need to. It just makes my video longer. All right. So for classical conditioning, we had to know John Watson and Ivan Pavlov. For operant conditioning, you got 2 people to know. Edward Thorndike, and he comes up with the law of effect. We'll talk about that in a minute. He does research on cats. He uses puzzle boxes and he puts the cat into a puzzle box, and then the cat has to solve the puzzle to get out and get his reward of food. B.F. Skinner is the guru of operant conditioning. He wanted to see how far he could take it. He's known for his radical behaviorism, And so he believed you could use this to train armies and everything else. He uses what he called an operant chamber, but today most people call it the Skinner box. He trained rats and pigeons and to do different behaviors. So we'll see some examples of that shortly. All right, so with Thorndike, his law of effect basically says behaviors followed by a favorable consequence become more likely to be repeated, and behaviors followed by unfavorable consequences become less likely to be repeated. That's the law of effect. You know, consequences matter is essentially what he was saying. He created these puzzle boxes, and you can see the puzzle boxes on the right. He would put a cat in a box, and the box had a lever and it had a pulley string, and he would set a dish of food just outside the box, and the cat would have to figure out how to get out of the box. And through trial and error, that cat would eventually figure it out. He had to move the lever and push on the string. It would open the door and he could go get the food. And so once he learned it, Thorndike saw that once he got that reward, he would repeat that behavior, and he became faster and faster at the behavior once he knew that would lead to the reward. And so that's how Thorndike comes up with that law of effect. Again, in the PowerPoint, there's a video that shows you how the puzzle box works. It's worth watching just to see the puzzle box because it makes a lot more sense if you see it in operation. So better than my description. All right, then you got B.F. Skinner. He's the guy. If you hear operant conditioning, you want to first think B.F. Skinner. He's a behaviorist, and he believed that your behavior was completely dictated by your environment. It was all a process of learning, things you had learned within your environment. And so he believed he could use operant conditioning, reinforcement, and rewards to make any animal or any person, for that matter, do anything he wanted. Everybody could be trained. To prove some of his theories, he created what he called operant chambers. And today, most people call those the Skinner boxes, named after him. He took the research of Thorndike and then tried to take it much further. And so you can see on the right is the puzzle box that was used by Thorndike. On the left is the Skinner box. And in the Skinner box, he would put a rat or a pigeon. That's generally what he used. There were different variations of the Skinner box. And, they would have to pull a lever or push a button, or maybe if you're a pigeon, you can't pull the lever and push the button necessarily, but you might have to peck on something or turn around. And then there was a food delivery system connected to the box. And so if the correct button is pushed or the correct lever is pulled, then it would, on a certain schedule, deliver a reward of food to the animal in the box. And so they would have to learn the behavior in order to get the reinforcement of the food. He would keep them hungry. You can't really do this with a rat or a pigeon that's not motivated to eat. So it kept them lean and hungry so that they would be motivated by the reward of food. All right, and this is a video of Skinner. It'll show you what the Skinner box is with a pigeon. And so the question was the pigeon know how to read? Because the pigeon would learn to recognize the word and the behavior that was supposed to come with it. So you can see the pigeon will turn or peck, whatever the word says in the box. So take a look at that. These videos are definitely worth watching, or I wouldn't show them. All right, shaping is another kind of operant conditioning procedure. It's like baby stepping operant conditioning, okay, gradual operant conditioning. And so you use reinforcements to guide the behavior toward this ultimate desired behavior. So you're baby stepping towards the desired behavior. And so you're rewarding the dog or the child or whoever you're shaping, usually it's animals, by the way, towards that desired behavior, but you can't go from A to B. You've got to have several steps in between to get there. I always think of shaping. I think that dolphins and orcas at SeaWorld, they do a lot of shaping with them to get to their ultimate tricks. And so you reward them along the way as they do parts of the trick, and then you make it a little tougher for them to get to the reward to do the next stages of the trick. And then at the end, you'll only reward them for the ultimate trick. This video on the right just shows the lady shaping a dog, what she's doing there is she's training this dog to be a service dog that can turn on and off a light switch. So she'll start with a light switch on the ground. Every time the dog gets its nose close to the light switch, she'll treat him, right? Later, she raises it up off the ground, and then she makes it eventually so he has to flip the light switch on in order to get the treat. So it's a graduated operant conditioning that will get you to this more complex ultimate behavior. You want to know what shaping is. That was probably the most missed question on the test for learning last year. So, all right, so let's talk about reinforcements. All right, reinforcements is any kind of stimulus that's going to strengthen a behavior. It's going to make it more likely for the behavior to be repeated. You've got positive and negative reinforcements. You've got to remember for reinforcements, they're always a good thing, okay? They're going to strengthen the behavior. They're rewarding in some way. Positive and negative don't mean good or bad. They mean positive means you're adding something. Negative means you're subtracting something. So you have to think of it in that way. A negative reinforcement is a good thing. Oftentimes students want to associate a negative reinforcement with a punishment, and that's not the case. The negative reinforcement, you're taking away something that's annoying. It's a good thing so that the person will repeat the behavior, okay? So a positive reinforcement, you're going to add something pleasant, a pleasant stimulus to strengthen the behavior, to get the behavior to be repeated. So, you know, getting praise or a high five, or you know, if your parents, you're lucky enough, your parents give you money for good grades, applause if you're in a play, those kinds of things. I used to give stickers for A's. That's positive reinforcement. A negative reinforcement, again, it's a good thing. It's when you take away something that's unpleasant to strengthen the behavior. So maybe you take away a loud noise, or if it's hot, you take away the heat, or cold, you take away the cold. Most of the time, we use an example of nagging. If you take away nagging, then the behavior might be repeated. So if your parents are nagging you to clean your room, and you finally clean it and they stop the nagging, then that is a reward. That's going to make it more likely, hopefully, that you're going to clean your room. Okay, so removing the nagging is a positive, right? That's something that usually motivates my children to clean their room. Okay, another way to think of it, and I think this was on a previous test and students didn't do well on it, so I wanted to make sure it was definitely in the slides. Sometimes you don't think of it, we think of it in terms of parents and children, but they're, you know, our behaviors are dictated by other things that aren't parental for sure. So if you assume I have a headache, all right, what behavior am I going to engage in? Well, I'm going to go get myself an Advil, all right? And so I'm going to take the Advil. Well, the Advil will take the pain of the headache away. That is a negative reinforcement, okay? It's taking away something unpleasant, my headache, and it's also making it more likely that I'll repeat the behavior of going to take an Advil the next time I get a headache, all right? So your headache pain's the stimulus, and then taking the Advil or the aspirin is the response. And then the consequence, the negative reinforcement, is that your headache goes away. That pain is taken away. So that's another way to look at it. On the next slide, there's something about a sunburn, okay? So a negative reinforcement, strengthen a behavior that avoids or removes a negative outcome. So it's removing a negative outcome. So, you know, I'm going to put on sunscreen. Not getting sunburned is a negative reinforcement, okay? It's removing a potential negative outcome, okay? Just remember that positive and negative, when we talk about reinforcement, is not good or bad. Positive is adding something, negative is taking something away. Both are good things, you know, that will reinforce the behavior. This is a pretty funny video. Again, you can watch the videos on your own. The Simpsons show you negative reinforcement. The kids are training the dad in that case, all right? Again, there's another video for you. Just remember, negative reinforcement is not punishment, right? The reinforcement is always a reward, and the negative part means you're taking away something that is disliked, okay, is annoying. All right, I'm gonna stop there and then we'll come back to this in the next video.